Hey, good afternoon everybody and welcome to Monza and the third and final race of the weekend from the Radical European Masters. It's Ben Evans and Josh Duran with you, and we are ready for hopefully another very entertaining race. We've had two great races so far this weekend. They have been claimed by Jamie Constable and Mike Cantillon respectively, and the race earlier on today was held on a damp but rapidly drying track. The sun has since come out. Josh has failed to bring an ice cream to the commentary box, but otherwise what's not to like?
Yeah, sorry, I had that earlier whilst I was outside sunbathing, so sorry about
that. We all suffer for our art as the cars formed up on the grid, and this is how they're up in full then. So James Littlejohn and Mike Cantillon on the front row, then Ross Kaiser and John Corbett row 2, Alan Costa and Andrew Ferguson on the third row from Jim Booth and Brian Caldwell, then Ricardo Donat and James Winslow, Yanni Herpia and Marcello Maratayotto to complete the first 6 rows. And we've got Jack Manchester and Martin Verity, John Caldwell and Konstantin Gukayev, and Jamie Constable, a 10-pace grid penalty after his contact with Jim Booth earlier on when Jamie rejoined the track after a spin. Unfortunately, it was right into the side of Jim Booth, and so that's why he starts from the rear of the field. Now, the start of this race again is going to be fascinating because the first 2 races we've seen this weekend, Josh, the Spiders have got the jump on the SR8s on the run to the Rettifilio.
Yeah, certainly will be. We've got a slightly more mixed up grid, and like I say, Jamie starting from the back is going to be interesting. He's got a lot of cars to get through. Obviously the SR3 Super Sport Series, they're going to be racing very hard, and we know it's competitive, so Jamie's got to do his best job to get through that pack and come through. But expect to see a fantastic start from Mike again. If he can get that braking right into turn 1, that should set him up nicely.
So there are 2 classes, as ever in the Radical European Masters. There is the Masters class, which is for the Spiders and the SR8s, and the Super Sport class, which is for the SR3 RSXs and the SR3s. Great racing in both of them, and here we see a real split between the classes because the Super Sport class cars have got braking distances that you measure in millimetres, incredible corner speed, but they're not as powerful in a straight line, and so you do really get 2 races for the price of 1 here at Monza in the Radical European Masters. The cars heading off now onto their final pace lap ahead of this hour-long race. As ever, there is the mandatory pit stop that becomes between 25 and 30 minutes of the race duration, and a reasonably long hold here before they get waved off onto the green flag lap, which they do now, and it's James Littlejohn, who was so impressive in damp qualifying earlier on, who leads the field on their way.
Yeah, worth noting, very different track conditions now to what we saw earlier. Sun's shining, it's very hot out there, so yeah, expect to see some slightly different lap times, certainly. I know the SR8 guys are keen to be pushing hard, so see what they come up with, but the Spiders should be on form yet again for this race.
Because what we've seen is that even where the SR8s are a little bit quicker than the Spider they're racing with, because of the straight line speed of the Spider, they're not really able to make any sort of overtaking moves stick. The progress of Jamie Constable from the back of the grid is going to be well worth watching, but Mike Cantillon might fancy his chances of trying to pull clear for a double win. The fly in the ointment here is the success seconds which have accumulated through the weekend, and Mike, on the basis of his great results so far, has got 35 seconds of additional success seconds in the pits. Jamie Constable has got 20 seconds, as do James Littlejohn and Tony Wells. Ross Kaiser and Matt have got just 10 seconds, so that could work out quite nicely for them, as James Winslow and John Corbett has got no success seconds because he's retired from the race earlier on.
Yeah, definitely. It should certainly mix things up. We've seen obviously 2 fantastic races, and I think this one could yet again be all decided towards the latter part of the race. It's the fantastic thing about having the success sessions in the pit stops. It just means it really does model the grid up and makes everyone really sort of both stints count.
Certainly does, and it plays an element of strategy into the race. It also means that through the course of the season you see lots of different drivers getting the opportunity to feature on the podium, which is what you want to see.
Yeah, definitely, and it does, it removes that predictability from the racing that we often see in other series, for example, and it just means that, okay, we just got Martin Verity pulling off at the side there, so I know he actually did have some work done on the car during the 2 sessions to do with the engine, so I wonder if there's been an installation issue there for seeing him pull off.
It's a real shame for Martin Verity. He didn't get to drive in the last race because Austin Kinsella retired the car reasonably early on, and unfortunately Martin Verity pulling off the road. Now hopefully they'll be able to get that car to a place of safety and we won't be into another formation lap before we get the race underway.
Yeah, imagine, fortunately, because they're, as you say, on the formation lap, they'll be able to do something fairly quickly before this gets going. So, one to watch, see what's happened there. But shame for Martin Verity, obviously a well-loved driver from the Radical Paddock, and just coming to the European Series a little bit this year. So, it's a real shame to see him coming out.
So the pack beginning to form up Noah's Ark style 2x2 behind the pace car. Little John is going to have to really hope he can anticipate the change of the lights here to have any chance of keeping Mike Cantillon behind him as they head towards the Rettifilio. And this time round, because the track is bone dry, it also means that Cantillon can be reasonably confident in braking a little bit deeper into the first sequence of turns than he was in the race that we enjoyed earlier on today.
Yeah, Little John's going to have to watch out. He's got Alos right behind him, so obviously he's going to be going slightly defensive against Mike Cantillon. He just needs to make sure he doesn't leave that door open for Manhal to overtake and make that early move.
I think it might be Ross Kaiser at the wheel, judging by the helmet, which makes it even more pressurised there for James Littlejohn as they swing out of the Parabolica, rolling towards the gantry, waiting for the change in lights. And Littlejohn ducks into the pit lane. James Littlejohn has a problem on the formation lap and heads into the pit. So it's Mike Cantillon who has got the front of the field all to himself as he charges away down towards the Rettifilio for the first time. Jamie Constable has overtaken about 4 cars already. Ross Kaiser getting his elbows out and does an excellent job of holding on to second position rather, as John Corbett slots into third. Then it's Alain Costa, Andrew Ferguson, everybody else jockeying for ground. In the background, I think that was Jack Manchester taking a trip through the escape route.
Big surprise there, seeing Little John dip into the pit lane, obviously. So just about what's going on there, but certainly that made Mike Cantillon's life a bit easier, but not good for the duo of Little John and Wells.
And what was quite odd about it was that Little John formed up in formation and everything like that. If it had been something that was more planned, he may well have peeled off earlier on in the formation lap.
Yeah, it was like a sort of last-minute decision, so going to be very intrigued to see what may have gone on there later on.
Meanwhile, Jamie Constable is already onto terms with Jim Booth, and a bit of a problem there on the brakes as well for Alain Costa. I think he was just kicking up a little bit of dust.
Yeah, he may have just run slightly wide and just come to the dust there, but yeah, worth noting, obviously Jamie's managed to negotiate around all the SR3s. Fantastic start from him, so let's see how quickly he can get past Booth and what he's going to do with the rest of the field.
Jim Booth gives Jamie Constable a fairly wide berth as Constable slips to the inside into Ascari. His next target now, it's Constable in the orange and white car, is Andrew Ferguson. In the Supersport class, it's Brian Caldwell who is leading that from James Winslow. I have to say, looking from our Contrabox window, James Littlejohn has not emerged onto the track as yet.
Yeah, just trying to see if we've got any sight of movement, but at the moment nothing. So see if he gets out in the next lap or two. But obviously, main bit of the damage is done by now as the rest of the pack have completed the first lap.
Brian Caldwell having an excellent start to the race. I just wonder whether or not that might be Bradley Ellis at the wheel of the 66 car.
I think Brian was planning to do the race on his own, but we'll hopefully be able to see shortly.
Try and pick out the helmet. Meanwhile, Jamie Constable gains another couple of places, past Alain Costa, past Andrew Ferguson. So that is up to fourth for Jamie Constable. Let's have a look at the helmets. No, that's not Bradley's helmet, it's Brian Caldwell.
And he's just been overtaken. I'm guessing we've got
James Winslow. Just went past him. And then we've got Ricardo Dona behind now. Out of the pit lane just now has come James Littlejohn, that was past our Contrabox window. So Littlejohn out, but he's a lap down. Meanwhile, Ross Kaiser doing a fairly good job of keeping Mike Cantillon honest, as you'd expect.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, as we've seen, it's been a real challenge for the even the pros in the SR8s this weekend. You know, the Spiders performed absolutely phenomenally at this track, so it's been really great to watch that, and certainly makes things slightly tricky for the pros in the SR8. So see what Ross can do, but yeah, obviously key for him to keep stuck to the back of that Spider.
Now, where's the next challenge coming from? It's Constable, who looks to the inside of John Corbett. This for third place, and Jamie Constable from 17th to third in space of just a couple of laps. He is driving with a bit between his teeth, and I think he knows that the race earlier on is one that got away. He also knows that if he can stay within 15 seconds of Mike Cantillon when they get to the pit stops, that will feed him out in front.
Yeah, really impressive opening few laps from Jamie. He's absolutely flown through that field. We've seen some great pace from Jamie all weekend, very consistent driving. It's just that we've had a few mistakes in each race, so fantastic to see him coming through the field now, and let's hope that he can keep that going for the rest of the race, and should make for a really exciting post-pit stop finish.
So down the start and finish straight we run once more, as Constable already pulling clear of John Corbett, 1.3 seconds is advantage. Front of the field running in the 1 minute 51 second bracket. Constable just setting the fastest lap of the race last time round, and that included a little bit of overtaking the Supersport class. It is James Winslow from Brian Caldwell and Ricardo Dona, then Marcello Maritiotto, Annie Herpier, Jack Manchester, John Caldwell and Konstantin Gugkayev.
Interesting Jim Booth looking slightly less comfortable in the car this race, but he did take a fair bit of damage in that last race, which I know the guys have done a good job of repairing, but wonder whether he's slightly struggling with the car a little bit in this race.
Well, it's something that I remember well from when I was racing, because I often took corners off cars, which is that you can only do so much at the circuit of getting everything in line, even with the very best equipment and all the work of the mechanics. To get the car perfectly balanced again, you do need to probably re-rig it at a factory.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I say, the guys do the best job they can here with limited tools and obviously limited parts available as well. But fantastic job from the crew to get that car back out with the damage that it did have. But as you say, always difficult to get back in and be straight on the pace with a slightly injured car.
Nonetheless, Jim Booth has been a master this year of playing the long game. He's always there or thereabouts when you get into the latter stages of the race. Meanwhile, Kaiser probing Cantillon. Now this potentially could be quite interesting because there's only 10 seconds worth of success seconds for Oscar Manhalalos. So Manhal could find himself inheriting a little bit of an advantage here once the pit stops have taken place. But that is still 20 minutes into the future, as Andrew Ferguson looks to like the move on John Corbett and is potentially going to be in a position to challenge quite nicely, but Corbett always seems to be able to manage that pace coming out of the Parabolica very nicely.
Yeah, between the two cars comes a bit of a drag race, and you say Corbett just got the slight upper hand there, so but let's see what Andrew does over the next couple of laps. He sticks to the tail of him.
Through the rest of the video they go. They've got Alain Costa behind them in 6th, then the slight gap back to Jim Booth. Then at the very back of your picture there you could see the Supersport class front runners, but it's great to see the Spiders well represented this weekend on the grid and consistently to the front of the field.
Yeah, no, it's really good to say Spiders a car we've been pushing hard recently. We've got a lot of customers that are really enjoying the drive of that. Plans for next year as well include that, as well as potentially relaunching the SR8, so we're looking at options as to giving that a facelift, much like we did with the SR3 back 2 years ago. So it's going to be hopefully an exciting season next year, seeing more of the Spider as well as an increased grid of SR8s as well.
Well, I think the SR8 and the Spider both offer a very different and distinct driving experience, which is great as a driver, and you've got that choice of which car do you go with and what best suits the sort of racing environment that you like, because the Spider offers fantastic preparation to move on to the upper echelons of LMP type racing, whereas and indeed historic Formula 1 if you're Jamie Constable and Mike Cantillon, where the SR8 is a really potent little, well, not little, it's a really potent piece of machinery.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, the comments from drivers especially are that the Spider very much handles and drives a bit like an SR3. It's a very well balanced car, bigger footprint. The SR8, as you say, is based on the SR3, but with the in-house RPE V8 engine, which provides a lot of power. You've got more weight at the rear, so it drives a little bit more like a go-kart.
Now again, Andrew Ferguson trying to make that move on John Corbett. And this time he thinks about the look to the inside, but John Corbett knows exactly where he needs to get on the brakes.
Yeah, I wonder whether the Andrew Ferguson car is carrying slightly bit more downforce, because he seems he's got quite an upright rear wing there, and it just seems like as he pulls out he cannot gain that advantage over the Spider of Corbett.
It's a good call. It's worth having a look at. It certainly explain why he's able to carry that increased speed through the Parabolica. And yes, it would seem as if probably Corbett's just one notch lower on the rear wing. Yeah,
and as I said earlier, it makes all the difference. And as you say, it's the fantastic thing about these cars is that obviously all the models within themselves are identical cars, so it comes down to driver performance and setup. So as you say, just a few millimetres between the rear wing make complete different driving characteristics for the car, so adds to the excitement, but it certainly is going to be a challenge for Ferguson to make that pass.
Meanwhile, Jamie Constable is already onto terms pretty much with Ross Kaiser and Mike Cantillon, and Constable has just set another fastest lap of the race. He dips below the 1 minute 50-second bracket, so we've got a three-way fight for lead, we've got a three-way fight for fourth, and then Jim Booth completes the Masters class in 7th. Winslow leads the Supersport class from Cordwell and Donut, but this leading trio begins to build a very handy advantage over the rest of the field, except to say, of course, that John Corbett, with no success seconds, is still emphatically in the hunt here to challenge for the win and certainly a podium.
Yeah, definitely. There's a number of things that can play out here, and obviously we've got Mike Cantillon, as you say, putting in fantastic lap times again. As you say, he's got very experienced Ross Kaiser behind him in the SR8, but he's managed to keep him at bay. But he does have this larger pit stop duration, which is going to be a definite struggle for him. But Constable, great lap times, as you say. John Corbett, if he can keep putting consistent lap times in and keep that gap small in front, he stands a very good chance this afternoon.
Andrew Ferguson thought about the move again on John Corbett into the rest of the field. It's just not happening there, and the problem is now, if you're John Corbett, you know what Andrew Ferguson's going to do, and you can plan accordingly.
Yeah, and the pair have got Costa right behind now. The trouble is, as they're trying to overtake and defend, they're losing time, which is why that gap in front has developed. And Costa is just going to hold on the back there and potentially look for an opportunity where he might be able to gain on that.
Andrew Ferguson, if he can, he just needs to find someone who can catch John Corbett a little bit by surprise. The problem being that Andrew is that little bit quicker than John Corbett, that Corbett knows he's going to could come at any corner, and therefore can defend accordingly. As now Alain Costa thought about a look to the inside at the first Lesmo. We've seen that move tried many times this weekend across the various classes racing here at Monza, and not with a huge degree of success.
No, we've seen some interesting attempts between the Spiders and SRH. As you say, it's each car slightly different characteristics and gain advantage at different parts of the circuit. So I think, as you said earlier as well, it is a narrow track. There's actually not loads of overtaking opportunities here. So as you say, Ferguson keeps gaining on him down the main straight, and Corbett knows exactly what he's doing. So he needs to just catch him off guard or keep the pressure on and force Corbett into a mistake.
Kaiser and Cantillon continue to fly in formation. Jamie Constable looks to close ever closer to their tail. We're focusing on the fight for fourth, where Andrew Ferguson, for the 5th or 6th lap in succession, is going to chance his arm with John Corbett, as now Constable lines up behind Ross Kaiser. And the problem here for Kaiser is that, to an extent, he'll be a little bit defenceless once they come out of Ascari and get out of the Parabolica, because that's where the Spider can use its grunt to very good effect. So Kaiser has to focus on his corner exit speeds, has to focus on his corner speeds as well. Start to ask some questions that the SR8 may not be entirely comfortable in answering, because you can see how far back Constable was and how he is able to think about a little bit of a look to the inside. But I'd imagine that Jamie Constable, after race 1, has probably just got Be Patient taped across the steering wheel.
Yeah, definitely. He's put in a fantastic performance the opening stage of this race, to seeing up behind Ross Kaiser already and putting in those lap times. Fantastic effort, testament to him and to the car. Jamie's really managed to switch that on, so he's got to play a slight waiting game, force Ross into an error, or just pick the right time so that he doesn't risk going off circuit as he did earlier.
Well, I'd imagine that the stewards after the race earlier on today were hammering home the message that crashing is a discretionary activity, and that there are many ways to avoid doing it.
Yeah, certainly were, and obviously Jamie, experienced racer, not just in this but other marks, so he was very frustrated himself and knows what he's got to do. So let's see how he manages to negotiate this pass on Ross. But
Ross Kaiser, he is going to be leaning on the car through the Parabolica, as he was at Ascari. It means that Constable, while he can close up again by the braking zone, I think Ross has bought himself just enough of an advantage, and a reference point really for the way that you approach Monza tactically. It's a little bit like the old Snetterton, where you, if you were trying to defend an underpowered car, you just had to ask everything through the corners. But Constable able to blast past along the straight up into second place, and now, as we've been talking about all weekend, the two friends, Mike Cantillon and Jamie Constable, are about to get what they've been hoping for, which is the chance to dice wheel to wheel. Yeah, I think I keep forgetting just how long this straight at Monza is. So you think Constable hasn't got enough room to do it,
and the pull of that Spider down that straight is incredible, and as you see, he gets that move done with relative ease in the end. But he's going to be fast approaching the back of Mike Cantillon, and these two very good friends off the circuit, but both very competitive racers, so it's going to be interesting to see how these two deal with each other when they come wheel to wheel shortly, I'd imagine.
Ross Kaiser, of course, looking to fight back if he possibly can through the Lesmos, uses just a little bit more of the road, bobs and weaves behind Jamie Constable. Jamie knows far better than to consult his mirrors. He's quite happy for Ross Kaiser to do all that hard work. Now here is a look at Andrew Ferguson challenging to the inside. Corbett through he went. Oh, and Alain Costa also looked at the gap as well as Andrew Ferguson ran wide and in fact loses everything and a little bit more.
Yeah, we've seen a number of mistakes like that this weekend. As I say, tricky braking zones, fast circuit, and again, we've had sort of different conditions for every race. So a few drivers being caught out and going wide, but fantastic effort and commitment and good racing from all three drivers there.
The Parabolica is one of those corners where it's notorious for a very good reason, and that is that you approach at incredibly high speed. Oh, and contact between Costa and Ferguson into Ascari, and Alain Costa beached in the gravel trap. So is Andrew Ferguson. It's a move, again, we've seen many times this weekend, and Andrew Ferguson shutting the door, possibly as Alain Costa was more than alongside them.
Yeah, I'd suggest with those cars there's a strong possibility that we may see a safety car, obviously both in fairly vulnerable position and very much beached in that gravel. So yeah, obviously need to look at replay to see exactly what happened there, but unfortunately both those guys, and yeah, real shame. Yeah,
great pity, because again, not knowing how the cars were going to fall as the race unfolded, they could have been in contention without the success seconds to figure in the podium equation.
So yeah, currently yellow flags out of turn 8 and 9, so no safety car at present. So
the organisers this weekend have been actually very good at recovering incidents under localised yellows, and there's certainly the view that if there's just that one recovery vehicle over at the scene at Ascari, it's not going to make much difference whether or not you throw a safety car or not in terms of the speed of recovery.
No, it's always difficult. We were chatting about this earlier actually with some people in the paddock, and it's very difficult getting that balance between, obviously safety's got to be paramount in the first thought, but the last thing anyone really wants to do is put a safety car out. It completely bunches the field up and undoes the work of those that have worked so hard. So great if they can get those cars recovered quickly and in a safe way. So looks like they may have already got rid of one car out of the way. So great effort from the circuit there.
Andrew Ferguson has already been dragged clear, and there you see in the background, and I completely agree, particularly in a race like this where the strategy is an element, the gaps that get opened up is an element. If you do have a safety car, which if it was thrown now would take us right to the point at which the pit lane opened, then it does enormously compromise a number of people's races. So that is Alain Costa, who I wouldn't want to be in the way of on the Autostrada later as he heads home.
No, fortunately for Alain, another very disappointing weekend. He's had a very difficult season, a mixture of technical issues, but obviously a number of faults of his own as well. So he's had a very tough season. See if he can bounce back next year and have a little bit better luck.
It's been one of those years for him as well where I think in Estoril, had he had even the slightest amount of luck, he would have won a race. And it was the same in Paul Ricard. And sometimes it happens where you've got a car that, had things fallen his way, he would have been in championship contention this weekend. As it is, the bad luck just keeps piling up.
Oh, certainly, and like I say, especially with him and Johan, who's particularly quick. It's interesting that Ferguson car's actually back on track. So a little bit of damage at the rear there, and throwing stones all over the circuit. So I'll be surprised if that car doesn't have to come straight in the pits.
Yeah. I'm not sure he who casts the first stone is going to be a valid argument with Brian Poulter, though, when they discuss that after the race.
I think you might be right, yeah. So interesting here actually that Constable just dropped off the pace slightly, so I'm having to defend Ross and the SR8 behind him, and Mike just stepped up his pace a little bit, so keeping a bit of a gap, but as we know when it gets to pit stops, Mike is going to lose out on a place or two.
Well, it's something that I find absolutely fascinating about the Spider is it's a car that is so rewarding, but it does bite if you just push that little bit too hard with it. You've got to understand where the limit is, and it challenges you to stay just the right side of that limit.
Yeah, certainly, and it's a big car. It's a lot heavier, but it's got a lot more power. And with the Ford V6 twin turbocharged engine, there's a lot of torque. So it's slightly more tricky out of the corners, applying the throttle and getting that right. But also, say under braking, you've got a lot more weight being thrown around. So a tricky car, something that a lot of the drivers have taken well to. And I know that Mike and Jamie particularly are very, very much enjoying racing these cars this year.
They're getting in amongst some of the Supersport runners as well. We've now got a green flag, so the circuit staff doing a great job recovering that incident from Andrew Ferguson and Alain Costa.
Yeah, and we've got that incident under investigation at the moment, so interesting to see whether they manage to make a decision in the race and what effect that may have. Obviously Costa completely out, so depends if Ferguson can get that car running again.
We haven't seen a replay of it, and yeah, I suspect it's one they can probably, but for the fact that they might need to get to the airport, push until after the race, because
yes,
I don't think either car is going to particularly be a factor in the second half of the race. As out of the first Lesmos comes Ross Kaiser in pursuit of Jamie Constable. Constable managing his pace to Mike Cantillon. And again, now this could be really astute tactical thinking from Jamie Constable. He doesn't need to race Mike Cantillon in this phase of the race, because once the success seconds are worked through, Jamie should theoretically emerge with a reasonably comfortable advantage, although Manhalalos should emerge ahead of Jamie. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think, as I say, it's Jamie's fully aware of Mike in front and that longer pit stop, so he's going to know that's going to come to him. He's not going to want to compromise that. So from his point of view, if he can keep Ross at bay and keep that slight gap and just look after his tyres in the car, it should really play into his hands in the second stint. As you say, he's most likely going to have to get past Manhalalos when he's in the SR8, which he knows he's got the pace and the ability to do. So if he can keep the car in good nick, he stands a very good chance of pulling that off.
We are only 4.5 minutes as well away from the opening of the pit window, so that's the point where it's all going to get really quite entertaining, as Cantillon continues to lead from Jamie Constable. 3.9 seconds is advantage. Ross Kaiser further 1.5 seconds back. Then it's John Corbett in 4th, Jim Booth in 5th, and then James Winslow leads the Supersport class, now 11 seconds clear of Brian Caldwell, who has got Ricardo Dona snapping at his heels. James Littlejohn, by the way, continues to circulate and at speed, but we've not yet got to the bottom of why he had to, sure, Facebook shall provide the answers later on, as to why he had to come in at the end of the formation lap.
Yeah, certainly that's obviously completely killed his race with Tony, and shame after such a good performance earlier, obviously. We saw the pairing do absolutely great, so being that lap down is going to hurt them. So we'll see what we can do in the second stint, obviously with Tony in, get past the SR3s and see if he can catch on to the tail of some of these guys, but a lot of work for those guys to do this afternoon.
But they will, with the attrition, be well set for 6th place in the Masters class. It's more points, and points mean the 24-carat gold Radical End of Season trophy.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, on the serious point, obviously you've got Tony Wells, James Littlejohn, really in contention with Manhal Ollis, and obviously Alex Capadia, although Ross Kaiser stepped in for this weekend. So they're the two that are going to be fighting to get as many points under the belt as possible. And
you never know what's going to happen. We'll have the triple header in Jerez, but all it would take is something going a little bit wrong in qualifying, a bit of a bump at the start of one of the races, and then they'll be looking back and saying, well, we should have definitely run that race, even though we were a lap down in Monza.
Yeah.
So,
and worth mentioning, obviously, what we didn't pick up from earlier is in between the race 2 and 3, the number 61 car of Manhal Ollis and Ross Kaiser was disqualified from race 2 for being underweight. So they actually lost any points they gained in that, which has given that gap to Tony Wells and James Littlejohn. So anything they can claw back in this race will be of advantage to them.
Well, I thought Manhal was looking particularly trim this weekend, but that's not ideal, is it? But again, it's so easy to do when you're running on such fine margins, and certainly, I'm sure, something that wasn't done with any malice, but just can be the odd oversight. It's one of the reasons when I was go-karting I always used to weigh in holding a bottle of water, as out of the chicane comes Mike Cantillon. His lead over Jamie Constable, 3.5 seconds. It stayed pretty stable at that for the past few laps. Just a reminder, when the pit window does open with 35 minutes left on the clock, they have to go past the pit lane open board before they then can come in and have their mandatory pit stop. We would anticipate that Ross Kaiser is going to stay out until the very far end of this pit window, but probably Mike Cantle and Jamie Constable will get their pit stops done fairly early. There's a good chance now for Jack Manchester to move clear of Konstantin Gurkaev, and they've got Ricardo Dona as well just in front. So some great dicing in the Supersport class as Constable right out to the curbs. For me, the ex of Ascari is always haunted by the ghost of David Coulthard binning the car on the formation lap for the Italian Grand Prix back in 1995.
Yeah, story that I know even himself has mentioned a number of times, so not one for him to remember and not one for anyone else to repeat.
Well, we'll spare David Coulthard's blushes by not speaking any more of that spin on the formation lap as along comes Mike Cantillon into the 14th lap of the race. And the three leaders now pretty much equidistant, just over 3.5 seconds separating each of them. And then John Corbett now quite some way adrift as well. But Mike Cantillon, let's not forget, started the weekend with a bit of a bump with an incident in free practice on Friday, but he has come back from that magnificently well.
Yeah, you say, a big accident for Mike on Friday, and he got straight back out in the qualifying. Told us he was going to take it easy, and then was leading qualifying right until the last couple of laps. So fantastic effort from him, very committed driver, very able, and you've got to say, between him and Jamie, although they've had a few issues and mistakes this weekend, the two of them have been absolutely phenomenal and right on the pace. So
yeah, they've really been the class of the field. And they also know that this is a golden opportunity to get some great results in the Spider. Because although last year in Jerez we did, I think, see the Spider taking the win with Alex Mortimer and Chris Hyman. Question mark, I think they did. Or was it Mosley and Bartels? Anyway, the Spiders were competitive in Jerez. It's a track where they're going to have to sweat the car slightly differently.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, I say the Spider does love these big circuits with the long straights and sweeping corners, as we've said already today. But Jerez is slightly more technical circuit with a lot more corners, so will be slightly more tricky for the Spider. Would expect the SR8 to do well, but there's a bit of contact there just as Mike coming across the front of the SR3. Yeah,
that felt like a little bit of an effort maybe to take the car's air away, but nonetheless, Mike Cantillon puts that lap on the Supersport class leader James Winslow. They will now go past the pit lane open board. There you can see the pit open board from the signaller's gantry. And so that means that next time around we'll start to see the pit stops getting underway. Now, from the last race, we know that Mike and Jamie decided to get their pit stops done early, because there's always these oscillating schools of thought about when you do your pit stops if you're a single driver. Is it that you do them first thing because that means if there's a safety car it's done and you're covered, or do you, if you're in a good rhythm, leave it until the end of the window?
Yeah, it's very tricky picking the right time, the right opportunity, and often you've got to make a decision last minute depending on where you are on track and who's around you. Obviously as well, we've got a number of teams that are servicing multiple cars, so they've got to make sure it fits in with the other cars as well to make sure they don't end up having too many cars in at once. So a few challenges both on the track and off the track as to the pit stops, and obviously we don't get the insight into the driver's radio, so we have to wait until we see them dip into that pit lane to see exactly when they're going to be heading in for their service.
So Mike Cantillon and Jamie Constable, they have had a race win apiece so far this weekend. Now, who is it going to be this time around, or will it potentially be Manhalal's? Because I think when all is said and done, Manhal is going to come out post pit stops with the lead of the race. The problem he's going to have is he's going to need almost to have a 2-second buffer over his rivals just to avoid being under pressure on the straights.
Yeah, certainly. Manhal will be watching close to this and certainly will be looking forward to getting out in front, but he's more than aware after this weekend and even this race that these two guys and others behind are phenomenally quick in the Spider. So the Spider off Andrew Ferguson in, so it actually looks like not too bad damage, and they've cleaned that car off, so quick bit of refuel, and hopefully he'll be able to get back out and track in that car after what's been a tricky race and difficult weekend so far.
Now into the Andrew Ferguson, the only driver to have made the pit stop. Cantillon and Constable deciding not to duck him. James Winslow has come in early to hand over to Peter Padden. Now, does that suggest that Winslow's going to take over from John Corbett in the second half of the race? Our driver nominations indicate not. The timing of that pit stop, and given how well Winslow was going, but maybe they feel they've got enough of a buffer, and given that Peter's made the trip all the way over from Australia, to give him a fair old crack at the second phase of the race.
Yeah, it'd be certainly interesting to see what happens with that. In comes the SR3, Stuart Mosley. He'll be handing over.
I think it's Donor out, Mosley in.
Donor out, Mosley in. Yeah, sorry for my mistake there. So it's the old helmet. Stuart used to have
I know,
the other helmet.
yeah.
It catches me out every time. Now he's gone to his carbon one. So
yeah, because he used to have that bright yellow helmet with the black diamonds, and diamonds clearly weren't forever, as he's now gone to the. Well, there's still, I think, the silver diamond on it. As also in his gym booth, as is John Caldwell.
So it's Bradley Ellis going to be hopping into the John Caldwell SR3 there. No refueling for these guys in the SR3s, obviously, so chance to drop the tyre pressures, get the drivers changed, and a quick check over the car before sending it back out.
And Bradley will be keen to press on as only he knows how, as Mike Cantillon about to come to the end of the 16th lap of the race. Is this, as we approach half race distance, the point at which he decides to head pitwards? Yes, it is, judging by the empty start and finish straight. And Jamie Constable follows in behind him. So the two race leaders into the pit lane now, Mike Cantillon and Jamie Constable. Ross Kaiser, therefore, runs in splendid isolation at the front of the field. And it means that for the Masters class cars, pretty much everybody is in except for Kaiser and Littlejohn. The fuel starts to go in to the Cantillon and Constable cars. Now this is the opportunity for Ross Kaiser to really play to the strengths of the SR8. He's not got to worry about catching the spiders through the corners. He can now just push as quickly as he can.
Yeah, definitely, and anything he can get here is going to more than help Manhal with that lead and being able to fend off those spiders. So there's no Ross, fantastic driver, nothing to worry about. So if he can get past this traffic and get a couple of quick laps in, that is going to be very interesting to see what Manhal does with that SR8 in the second half of this race.
Peter Padden demoted by Ross Kaiser, and that was always going to be fairly inevitable for Ross Kaiser as he works around the Australian driver. He's on his outlap out of the pits in the Supersport class car. So Kaiser, the pit window closes when the pit lane close ball goes out. So theoretically, if Ross Kaiser goes over start to finish line with 1 second over 25 minutes left on the race clock, then that lap still is valid and he's still within regulations for the pit stop. So on that basis, there's potentially time here for at least another 2 laps for Ross Kaiser.
Yep, always the challenge, you say, it's getting that level right, because miss it by a second and it can either way give you the result that you do or don't want. So yeah, he obviously wants as many laps as he can to push that gap open, but he's got to be careful he doesn't have a slow lap or an incident that would end up causing a problem and letting them miss out on that pit window.
A couple of years ago in the GT Open, we had Giorgio Pantano into the pit lane at Silverstone for his pit stop with 2 seconds left on the pit window as he came over the pit entry line, which was just showing off really.
So interesting there with Constable coming back out, obviously a lap down but just in front of that car of Ross Kaiser, so that just shows what gap Ross has opened up.
And there is Mike Cantillon, so Jamie Constable has got the jump on Cantillon through the pit stops, as we surmised might be the case, but now it's the chance for Mike to demonstrate if he's got the ability and means to come back at Jamie Constable's advantage, or whether Jamie, who has absolutely been playing the long game here. The wild card, of course, is Manhal Alos, and that last lap for Ross Kaiser was a 1 minute 50.4. So not a pace to sniff at for Ross Kaiser, but he did lose a little bit of time behind Peter Padden, so maybe wasn't able to go quite as quickly as he would have liked. He's going to have time for certainly one more lap as he comes to the end of this one. Also in is James Littlejohn, who jumps out to go and consult with Tony Wells.
Yeah, difficult for these guys, obviously used to being up near the front, so it's going to be difficult for Tony hopping in there knowing that he probably can't have much of an effect, but still, any points they can get is going to help, so they'll be going out and looking for a finish. And
also we've seen 1 or 2 people maybe going a little bit of the wrong way with the fuel calculations late on. As long as they're out there and they're circulating, then you never know what's going to happen.
No, you never know. Like you say, still, 27 minutes of the race to go, so lots can happen. We've seen a number of mistakes this weekend, spins, contact, mechanical failures. So yeah, if you can be out there keeping the pace up and being consistent. You never know what's going to happen.
So Ross Kaiser, he will have to pit in at the end of this lap, as that is going to make it an 18-lap stint for Ross Kaiser.
Yep, great drive by Ross. He's managed to obviously keep that gap small, keep the pressure onto those front runners. So he's done very well. He's done his job, and hopefully we'll hand over a car in good state to Manhal to be able to try and complete the job.
Well, Ross Kaiser, reigning champion, of course, alongside Terence Woodward, and they had the sort of year that Tony Wells and James Littlejohn are enjoying this year, which is when they needed the results to go their way, they did. It's not to diminish the pace that they're running at, and the fact they had a fantastic year and drove brilliantly. But sometimes to win a championship, you just need some of those things you can't influence to swing in your favour. And now Kaiser getting onto terms here with Jamie Constable fairly quickly. Of course, Constable, heavy car. Ross Kaiser running probably on fumes.
Yeah, no, exactly that. It's a load of fuel being chucked into the Spider for Constable, so he'll be feeling that slightly. So obviously, say Ross will be dipping in this lap, so he'll be going as close as he can, keeping up the speed before coming in for his pit stop.
Through Ascari and then out on their way towards the Parabolica with Constable fully focused on the job in hand. His lead over Mike Cantillon was 9.8 seconds at the end of the last lap. On this lap, Constable and Cantillon, there's only 0.4 seconds to choose between the pair of them, just in favour of Mike Cantillon. And, well, but for 3 seconds, Ross Kaiser might have been able to eke another lap out of that. As it is, he comes in to hand over to Manhal Alos.
Yep, late pit stop, I say, just in time, so he's fine for that. Hopefully there's no problems here and they manage to get refueled, get Manhal in and get that car back on track promptly.
So essentially Jamie Constable's now got to do a whole lap whilst Manhal jumps in to the SR8, and it's then the point at which Manhal vacates the cockpit. Now we know certainly from the performance of Ross Kaiser that the car has got the ability to go toe-to-toe with Jamie Constable. The other thing that works in favour here of Manhal, of course, is when he comes out of the pits, he's going to have a slightly lighter fuel load compared to when Jamie Constable was on his outlaps, just by dint of Ross Kaiser going a little bit deeper into the race. So here is Constable racing the static car of Manhal's in the pits, and Constable that last lap gave away a couple of tenths to Mike Cantillon, but not to the extent he's going to particularly worry about it. In the Supersport class, Peter Padden leads that just from James Robinson, but Marco Cenchetti, just a 5-second deficit, you'd expect is probably going to work his way through that pack, as will Stuart Mosley, who's fourth of the Supersport runners. Yeah,
it's been a great weekend for Peter Padden. Obviously, first time in the European Masters Series, a frequent racer in the Australian Series. So great to have him with us, and he's really taken to this track and this style of racing very well.
Now, looking out of our commentary box to see at what point Manhal runs down the pit lane. And
so he's just left his pit box now, so he's on the way down to the pit exit.
So he's going to have a fairly handy advantage here from Jamie Constable. Here is Manhal Alos, who rejoins the race directly in front of us. That camera angle you're seeing is actually directly above our commentary box as Alos rejoins. There is Constable in the background, and now this a golden opportunity for Manhal to make amends from the earlier disqualification, score a race victory. But the real difficulty he's going to have is just how to defend from Jamie Constable. What if Constable can get within touching distance?
Yeah, certainly Manhal very used to overtaking and defending, so he'll have a few tricks up his sleeve, I'm sure. He's going to struggle when that Spider gets up to his rear end on the straight, certainly. But obviously this could also work into Mike Cantillon's favour if the two are jousting and defending for a while. Give Mike a chance to close that gap and potentially give Jamie a bit of a race.
Certainly could, as Jamie Constable just turns into the first lesson. We've still got over a third of the race remaining, so Jamie doesn't need to force this. He can just size up what Manhal is doing, see if he can begin to close that gap down. At the same time for Manhal, if he can just focus on those corner exits, make sure that Jamie can't get within the point where he could really look to power past, and it could be advantage Alos as through Ascari. the two leaders pick their way in the late afternoon sunshine. Not quite, but almost racing into the evening here in Monza.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, you see all the drivers with sun-tinted visors, but this sort of time of day, you get big patches of shade and light. So that was slightly...
Oh, he's gone! Jamie Constable spins at the parabolica and he parks the rear tyres in the gravel trap. He may struggle to get out of there, and that's such a pity. It's his second spin at the parabolica today, both of which have eliminated him from potential race-winning challenges.
Yeah, unbelievable from Jamie. I mean, he'll be kicking himself again, and we've seen this so many times from Jamie this year and even this weekend. Fortunately, actually, he managed to get it re-going because he was in the gravel, so should be no damage done. So just shake a bit of that gravel off, get back on the track and see what he can do. But obviously, that's allowed Mike to dip through. Just a replay here. Yeah, just slightly overdid it. Too much speed for that corner, and say just lost it. So he'll be kicking himself. Real shame for him, but not so lost, I'm sure. Mike will be catching up to the back of Alos over hopefully the next few minutes, but quite a gap there now.
Yeah, it is a 10-second lead pretty much, Manhals, over Mike Cantle. And then you see Mike in the background, and I'd imagine that Alos and Kaiser cannot believe their luck, just as Jamie Constable was getting to the point where he's going to make it very uncomfortable. Jamie has recovered, by the way, into third place, and still he's 10 seconds clear of John Corbett. So that means that all is not lost for Jamie Constable. He's still on course for the podium, but it was the replay as well was a great example of what happens when suddenly you overstep the line with the aerodynamic grip, the car just going away instantaneously.
Yeah, obviously with this car, very high downforce, which does allow them to corner very quickly, but as soon as you lose it, you lose all that downforce, and that's when you spin. So there's a real fine line between on the limit and over the limit, and as we've seen a couple times this weekend, and it's a classic example there of it just going a little bit wrong.
But Mike Cantillon already 1.5 seconds quicker than Manhals through the first two sectors on the lap, and Cantillon, I'm sure, would have had a little grin to himself in his helmet as he passed the spun car of Jamie Constable, because it takes the task away from him, and it now releases Cantillon to potentially challenge for the race when it was 9.8 seconds at the start of the lap. It's down to 6 seconds at the end of it. Manhal a 1 minute 52.7, Mike Cantillon 1 minute 49.2, and at that rate of capture, Mike will be on terms with Manhal with plenty of time to spare, but that was a little bit scraggly through Retofilio. He just went into the first part a little bit too quickly, had to tighten off the exit.
Yeah, we know Mike struggled a little bit there all weekend, just getting that point of braking right, so not surprising, but I say still putting in some great lap times, and fantastic last lap, taking so much time out of him. So with just over 18 minutes to go, you've got to think that he's going to be up there challenging for that first place position.
I think that is a fairly safe assumption to make, because even with that slight error at the Retofilio, he still took 1.5 seconds out of Manhals just through, or 1 second out of Manhals just through the first sector. So the advantage is certainly Mike Cantillon's, but again, he's just got to make sure he doesn't get over enthusiastic here. He's got to make sure that once he gets onto turns with Manhals, that he doesn't force the move. He doesn't push and try something where he really doesn't need to.
Yeah, hopefully after the few incidents that have happened the weekend, Mike will know just to play the waiting game. Say he's putting in some nice, consistent, smooth laps now, which is eating away at the time. So that should give him a good few laps to be able to challenge for that first position without having to go for any crazy moves.
At the same time, it'd be horrible if Manhal were to spin away his chances under pressure from Mike Cantillon, but it's another 3 seconds gained over the course of the lap, or is it for Cantillon? Has a huge slide again through the parabolica. It shows just how on the limit he is.
Yeah, certainly. You saw him do that earlier in the weekend as well, and he did ask me, did it look good on TV, but I did tell him not to repeat it. So well held again, but hopefully he doesn't try and do too many more of those, otherwise he might be back behind Jamie again.
Yeah, and Jamie, his last lap was a 1 minute 52, not unsurprisingly, because he was pretty slow into it. But here is a replay. Oh dear, and that's Stuart Mosley letting go in a big way in the one of the front-running Super Sport class cars. Really disappointing for Ricardo Dona, because that's 2 retirements now for the weekend, and a pool of smoke hanging over the Curva Grande.
Yeah, very unfortunate to say has 2 mechanical failures now for the SR3 of Donor and Mosley. So unfortunate, obviously great pairing, very quick. So they'll be very upset over that. So real shame to see that car go.
It's just the temptation to push to the limit of what you can do with the car. But for Mike Cantillon, continues to chase down Malhals. He's still got over a quarter of the race, would you believe, to try and find a way past him. Now Stewart, judging by the slippery surface flags, has possibly elected to continue all the way on to the pit. So this is going to make it hopefully not too precarious.
Yeah, hopefully manage to stay offline so as not to put any oil down. But Manhal pushing very hard there. You can see him really working at SR8. But Mike's right on his tail now. So he's going to be looking for a move as he comes out.
He is, and he makes the job look very easy indeed. He takes lead of the race on the run towards Parabolica and then loses it and goes straight on into the gravel trap. And Mike Cantillon, he's into the wall. Having taken the lead from Matt Howells, he just brakes fractionally too late for the Parabolica and is buried on the far side of the gravel trap.
Unbelievable. I mean, I can't believe he's managed to overdo that again on that corner. And as you say, just a big lock up, too much speed. Replay here. So we see he comes by carrying way too much speed, hits the brakes, has a massive lock up, can't get the car turned, straight into the gravel. And as soon as he hits those, he's skidding and has no control of the car, straight into the barrier. So real shame for Mike Cantillon.
So Cantillon, fortunately, the impact of the barrier went in sideways and not too quickly by then, so I don't think there'll be too much damage to the car unless Mike gives it a good kick when he gets out of it.
Yeah, there's Mike now just walking away, so looks very disappointed, obviously. He'll be kicking himself, but for Manhal and for Ross, yet again another little bit of luck that goes their way. So currently with a gap to James Constable of 32 seconds, this could be a fantastic opportunity for Manhal and Ross to get that top spot on the podium.
Particularly as Jamie's pace has plummeted. It was at 2 minutes 1 last time around. And what was just... Actually, everybody's pace dropped quite a lot last time around. I think it suggests the track is quite slippery still.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, that moment for Mike Cantillon, it was one of those as well that, because he was on the brakes for so long, had he got off a little bit earlier, he might have retrieved it. But by the time he came off the brake, he hadn't scrubbed any speed off and he was on the wrong trajectory.
Yeah, certainly. And as I say, we see a lot of tracks with a lot of big runoff, and obviously this one there's a fair amount. But as soon as you get into that gravel, obviously it's made to slow you down, and you do lose all control. So unfortunate for him. In hindsight, as you said, he probably should have played a little bit of waiting game, went for that big move quite early on. So yeah, real shame. But it would have been nice to see that battle play out at the front.
I mean, what will probably cause him the most irritation when he watches the race back later, I would suggest, is that now that looks suspiciously like James Winslow at the wheel of John Corbett's Spider to me.
Yeah, it certainly does. A helmet we recognise, and he's right on the tail of Constable, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the end of this lap.
But I think it was more that even if he got on the brakes a little bit earlier, that the job was done with Manhal. But that's what racing's all about. The adrenaline's pumping, the passion is pumping, and the marshal's done a great job. Mike Cantillon's car already recovered. And Winslow trying to tap himself to the inside of Jamie Constable. This is the battle for second and third place with 13 minutes remaining. What sort of pace is... Well, Jamie Constable has elevated his pace to respond to James Winslow. They both lapped in a 1 minute 52 as Winslow to the inside of Constable. He should go through here, and indeed he does. And now you have to ask the question about whether or not James Winslow could chase down Manhals. It's 31 seconds. It's an enormously big gap, but with 12 and 3/4 minutes, it might just be on, particularly if...
It's probably, looking at the pace we've seen, it's just in reach, but actually Constable challenging for that place again, which is not going to help Winslow. And a tap from the two there, giving each other a little bit of space at the exit, just... not to force each other off the road. So Winslow needs to try and get away from Constable as quick as he can if he does want to challenge for that first position.
Up into fourth place is Jim Booth. As we said earlier on, when it all shakes out, Jim is always there at the front of the field. And then in fifth place, leading the Supersport class, it's James Robinson. Sixth is Marco Cencetti. Seventh, Peter Padden. Eighth, Yanni Herpian. Ninth, Andrew Ferguson. 10th is Bradley Ellis. And Tony Wells actually ducked back into the pits very early into his stint. We didn't see him coming in, but...
Yeah, I think we missed that one, obviously not on the coverage. So clearly struggling with car problems there. So bit of a bad race for those guys.
Particularly as Malhaas and Ross Kaiser. I think I'll ask them to pick my lottery numbers for next week, because they have had these two spiders chasing them down just on the cusp of making the pass and then spinning away their chances.
Yeah, fantastic result for them so far, and obviously a shame for us because we were hoping for a fantastic sort of closing stage of the race, which I feel like we've been cheated on.
Well, Alos, that last lap of 1 minute 52.1 from James Winslow, 1 minute 51.3, so he was about 8 tenths quicker. That's not going to be enough to chase down 30 seconds in 11 minutes, as Jamie Constable, in fact, fancies his chances back to the inside of James Winslow, and he's going to go for it here. Jamie Constable, oh, when he spins it away, just trying a little bit too hard into the Rettifilio, and it was always a tight angle, and he turned in, and he asked a lot of the car, and unfortunately the car didn't have the answers.
Yeah, these two very evenly matched on the straight in terms of pace. It all comes down to the braking. As we know, that's been a tricky corner all weekend. And actually, as you see here, Jamie making the move on the inside really compromises the turn-in. And he's still on the brakes as he turns, and it just throws the back of the car around. So very difficult. And obviously, Jamie Winslow, an experienced driver, manages just to get that car through safely.
So that's a real pity for Jamie Constable, because particularly yesterday afternoon, he didn't put a wheel wrong in the first race of the weekend, but he's now had a couple of moments in the second two. Any more rotations for Jamie? It's certainly going to open the door to Jim Booth to challenge for the final spot on the podium. It now, though, releases James Winslow into the dusk to see what he can do. His first target is going to be Konstantin Gudkaev. And I think what we can say with a reasonable level of confidence is that James Winslow probably won't spin it away at the Parabolica.
No, very consistent, level-headed driver. So, but he will be pushing, knowing that Manau is down the road. But as you say, with under 10 minutes now of the race, he's going to pull out something pretty special to be able to do anything with this.
So a race, again, of complete drama and contrasting fortunes. And it also shows as well, I think, the mental and physical toll that the weekend starts to take on the drivers, because the sort of mistakes we're seeing are just those momentary lapses that come when you're a little bit tired, a little bit fatigued, and unfortunately result in some spins. So it's more ground gained for James Winslow, but the 69 car just hasn't quite had the pace of some of the other spiders this weekend for whatever reason. Maybe they just went the wrong direction in setup slightly, and it means that the Winslow is unable to take too much of a bite out of Alice's advantage at the front of the field. Yeah,
no, I think I'd say he's a fantastic driver, very quick, but it's probably just slightly too big a task. But I think the pairing will be happy, obviously, with their technical issue earlier, which they were very disappointed in. So if they can bring that car back in second place when all's said and done, I think they'll be happy looking at the drivers that were out there on the track today.
Certainly will. It is a little bit lighter, actually, than some of these camera angles are suggesting, as they navigate the forests around Monza, or rather the Monza circuit. It is the most inauspiciously situated track. You would never know, even within probably half a mile of the circuit gates, that it was a Grand Prix circuit nestling inside the park. You know,
it's amazing. As you say, it's a big public park, lots of runners and cyclists, and it's a sort of small streets with coffee shops around the corner. So yeah, it's a great location, fantastic circuit with great facilities. I know all the drivers absolutely love this as a circuit. We've been here for 3, if not 4 years now, and it's a circuit that they want to keep coming back to.
I think it's a circuit as well that you always feel it's a privilege to watch motor racing here, because away from the Italian Grand Prix for several years, it didn't really feature on the calendar of all that many things. You didn't see racing from there all that often, so to get the chance to race here is always thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not an easy track to get to in terms of testing, and can be very expensive if you do want any time on it. So a real good opportunity for these guys to get onto a big track, and as you say, featured in the Formula 1 calendar just a few weeks ago. So great to have these cars and these guys out on the same track that the top level motorsport guys are using.
I think that the question is, could Lewis Hamilton cut it in the Radical European Masters? As
I'm not sure. We've got some pretty good drivers out there, so
absolutely.
He did early in the year have Lewis Hamilton in an SR3 over in Barbados at the Bushy Park Festival of Speed, and they run a good SR3 series out there, around sort of 20 cars that turn up. So he did drive the car and thoroughly enjoyed it. So you never know, maybe in a few years when he looks at retirement, we might see him out in a Radical.
Well, I think it's a type of car that drivers always enjoy having a go in, because it's one that rewards you immediately, but then you just find more and more and more with it.
Yeah, certainly. And again, last year, 4 SR3 RSXs featured in the Race Champions. Something we're looking at doing again this year. So lots of top drivers get behind the wheel of that. Always interesting to hear their feedback, and I think often quite surprised at the pace this car does have.
Well, my sympathies with the Radical team. Will get to go out to Florida for the Race of Champions.
Yes, it's hard life, but someone's got to do it, hey?
Absolutely. And at least it'll be warm this year.
Yeah, certainly. We've had a good year in America this year with our North American Cup. We had over 40 cars out of COTA just 2 weekends ago, and it looks like we'll be looking to do a big event either next year or 2018, sort of endurance style race with all marks of Radical taking part, something like a 6-hour race. So hopefully that may feature in a big F1 circuit with a lot of international drivers coming. So really trying to push these cars all around the globe, and with the series building in America, it's fantastic really for us.
Absolutely. And it's a formula that works, and the fact that it's been adopted globally shows that. All of this is a slight digression on the basis that Van Hals leads by 27.5 seconds from John Corbett, or rather James Winslow in John Corbett's car, and Jamie Constable's a further 17 seconds back. So it is relatively settled, with Jim Booth in 4th, further 15 seconds back. James Robinson leads the Supersport class, actually doing a very good job of keeping Marco Cenchetti at arm's length, and just suggests that maybe Cenchetti Maritiotto haven't quite. I think it's a combination of the fact that the cars are so even that Cenchetti's through the confidence through the corners isn't maybe rewarding him quite as much this weekend at this track as it does at some venues. So here is Manhal Alos, our race leader. He is going to be about to embark on his 30th lap of the race. We've probably got time for 3 more, including the one that he's about to start now. Indeed, that's exactly what it looks like it's going to be. So Alos surges through, completes lap 29.
Yeah, really, it's been the perfect race for Manhal and for Ross. Just looking actually, that rear right bodywork on Manhal's car looks like it's come loose. You can see it bouncing around. There's a clip that's undone, so you're going to have to watch that one. Obviously, hopefully that will stay down, but if that develops into anything more, he does risk getting a black and white flag for that.
Yeah, it'd be incredibly frustrating if he has to pull in with moments remaining.
No, certainly has. Sorry, as I was just starting, it's been fantastic. Perfect race really for Kvadia and Alos. They've put in some consistent times, kept it nice and clean, kept out of any contact. As you say, a couple of people in front of them just letting go and pushing the cars too hard. So if Manhal can just last his last 4 minutes of the race, it'll be a fantastic victory for these two.
Yeah, I think it's also a testimony. I mean, Manhal and Ross Kaiser are right on the limit of what the car's going to do. They are very, very fine exponents of racing these SR8s, and therefore you can be lulled into a full sense of security in the Spider, that just because you're a little bit quicker than it on the straight doesn't mean that Manhal doesn't know exactly the last possible moment to brake the car for some of the corners, and therefore if you brake a little bit later, it might result in a quick rotation. Yeah,
exactly. You say many of these drivers, Manhal being one of them, have driven this model of SR8 for many, many years and are very much experts in it. So another reason that the new SR8 next year will be exciting. It'll bring a new dynamic. It'll be very much similar mechanically. We're going to have some new aerodynamic parts on it, new bodywork and a new look. So these guys can have a slightly new toy to play with next year should they go down that route.
Well, very, very much looking forward to that, and of course we will hear in due course what the Radical European Masters calendar for 2017 is going to be featuring as well. Now there is Tony Wells just ahead of us, so Tony back out on track, because if he stays out for another 2 laps, which is what's remaining in the race, he's going to jump ahead of Mike Cantillon, so that would award him 6th place in the Masters class, and question mark about whether or not he'd be formally classified because he's some way off. But whatever the issue has been for Tony Wells and James Littlejohn. Now here is the fight for the Supersport class lead, just as they went through the front of the camera. and that was Chen Chetty right in pursuit of James Robinson. We'll probably pick that up again as they head towards the chicane. There it is, and here comes Chen Chetty. Looks to the inside of Robinson. No way through there for Marco Chen Chetty, but suddenly the Supersport class lead is going to go all the way to the wire here. They are also, I think, going to have the benefit of a couple of laps to sort themselves out, unless Alos can catch them and lap them between now and within the next 2 laps. That's actually probably quite likely for Matt Hulse, but his next target is Tony Wells. Now the last lap from Tony was a 1:55, which suggests that all is well, we know all is not as it should be with that car.
Yeah, and that'll be rubbing salt in the wound for Tony, having Manal fly past in there, obviously seeing him come round and get another lap up on him. So not a good day for Tony and James, or I shouldn't say not a good day, they had a fantastic afternoon, but not a good race.
Yeah, it's not been a brilliant race for them, but, you know, that is the way it sometimes breaks. Now here is Chen Chetty behind Robinson. The problem being the Supersports will brake so late for the Parabolica that unless Chen Chetty is fully alongside, there is very little that he can do. I don't think he was, as Alos swoops through the Parabolica for the penultimate time. He goes in to start the final lap of the race, and well, Manhal has, I think against expectations possibly, been able to build up a very big buffer. So he withstood the challenge of the various spiders. Now, oh, you don't want to get caught up in that, Manhal. Chen Chetty.
No, you can see Chen Chetty just wanting to sort of move out to the left-hand side there, and Manal coming down. So slightly tricky, but yeah, those two in the SR3, very good, very quick drivers in identical cars. So pushing hard, and Manhal trying to find a way through. Very, very tight there.
The words Taki Inoue are suddenly springing to mind as they head towards this second chicane, and Manhal is determined to make this stick. He makes it 3 wide. It doesn't quite open the door to Chen Chetty, but Robinson's now going to have to measure his braking against that of Manhal, and that's why I love watching Manhal racing, because there is never any hesitation or quarter given. He will just press on and go as quickly as he can. As behind, Chen Chetty had a little bit of a look to the inside at the first Lesmo. Nothing doing there for Chen Chetty. Robinson carries more corner speed on the way out into the second Lesmo, and now Alos can stretch his legs and ease clear of the Supersport runners, which is probably will make Robinson quite happy. It's 1 foot fewer lap to do. But for Manhal Alos, well, after disappointing disqualification from the earlier race, victory for him and Ross Kaiser. It's going to make the championship very interesting when we head on to Jerez at the final weekend of October. Of course, you'll be able to watch all 3 races live here on YouTube, and they are not to be missed. As on towards the Parabolica for the final time then for Manhal Alos. It's going to be victory in the 3rd and final races for the Radical European Masters here in Monza, as Alos accelerates out of the Parabolica. The checkered flag is ready and waiting, and it is the win for Matt Hulse and Ross Kaiser. Very fitting victory for them. James Robinson is going to take the Supersport class victory alongside Jack Manchester from Marco Chen Chetty and Marcello Maracchiotto, with James Winslow getting the chance to appear on both podiums, because Peter Padden and Winslow finished 3rd in Supersport class, and they finish, and then John Corbett and James Winslow are runners-up in the race overall, with Jamie Constable en route to 3rd place now.
Yeah, not the race Jamie was expecting, but as I say, still a solid podium finish, so I don't think he'll be too disappointed even with the mistakes that did happen.
And it still worked out better than it did for Mike Cancelon, who we unfortunately lost in the wall at the Parabolica at about 2/3 race distance. So 3rd place for Jamie Constable. Let's take a look back then at the highlights of the race, and it was Mike Cancelon who took the early advantage, having a clear run all the way down to the Rettifilio for the first time, with then Ross Kaiser in 2nd, and carving his way through from the tail of the field, Jamie Constable, who was spectacular in the early laps. Constable making fairly short work of Jim Booth early on. And then also Andrew Ferguson, Alan Costa in the single manoeuvre before setting his sights on John Corbett. Front of the field though, Cantelon was holding station from Ross Kaiser. Meanwhile, Andrew Ferguson and Alan Costa also doing battle with John Corbett, a little bit too close for company at times. That was certainly the case for Costa and Ferguson. Alain to the inside of Andrew. Andrew, not sure he saw him. Contact into the gravel trap and game over, unfortunately. Post-pit stops, Jamie Constable was chasing down Manhals until that happened at the Parabolica. That promoted Mike Cantillon to be the chaser-in-chief. This was the move that gave Mike Cantillon the lead of the race. He got to enjoy it for 200 metres, then missed his braking point and skittered across the gravel trap and dunk into the wall, out of the race. Jamie Constable then was fighting for second with James Winslow until that spin happened. So it was Manhals and Ross Kaiser who took the victory from James Winslow and John Corbett, and Jamie Constable completing the podium. So from Monza, it's been a wonderful weekend of racing in the Radical European Masters, and it's goodbye from Josh Duran and Ben Evans. We'll see you in Jerez at the end of October to decide the championship.